So welcome everyone to 7 must-try user experience tactics for developers. We're so happy to have you guys join us today for the next hour as we talk about different ways and different things that you can try to help improve the applications that you develop. We're really excited about this topic, and we can't wait to share with you some of the things that we've learned over the years to help you not only meet, but exceed your users' expectations.
Speaking about those expectations, your users have higher expectations than ever from your applications. Users expect to be able to come into your application and have information well organized, easy to use, and intuitive right from the start.
What if I told you you only had 10 seconds to make a good impression with your users? Would your applications pass that test?
What if I told you only have 20 minutes to help your users feel like they have successfully achieved a goal in your application? Does your application do this today?
Hi, my name is Tiffany Nolan. I'm an interaction designer at Red Hat. I'm currently working on web UX, so I'm focused on the Red Hat developers website. I have more than 15 years of experience as both a designer and a front-end developer, and sometimes doing both jobs at the same time.
My name's Robson. I'm a manager on the user experience design team at Red Hat. I manage a team of designers and developers. And throughout my career, I have helped many teams and organizations adopt user experience practices into their daily lives.
So right before we get to our question, by the end of our presentation, we don't expect you guys to be experts, but we really do hope that you have some things to kind of take back with you as you work on your next applications. So question time. I'm curious, we're at DevNation, so how many of you guys in here right now are developers? Raise your hands. Awesome, all right.
99.9%.
I think it was one person. So how many of you have worked with a UX designer?
30, maybe?
It's more than I thought.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. So for those of you who have worked with UX designers, you know that design is really a team effort, and having a good user experience is part of your job, even if you aren't a user experience designer. As a developer, you're responsible for building the experience, and there's a lot of decisions that are made during that process that do impact the user experience, whether a designer is helping you with that or not. For those of you who are developers and have not worked with user experience designers, we really hope these tactics will help you kind of get started with how you can adopt practices into your development lifecycle, and understand if you do work with a designer in the future, how you can communicate better with them, but regardless, give you some tools that you can use to improve your user experience for your applications.
So learning UX will definitely make you a better developer. There's definitely some challenging goals to meet in the current, out in the current marketplace right now. So we really want to help you to keep the information organized in your applications, to make them intuitive and easy to use. We really want to help you kind of meet those attention span goals that we just talked about. We're going to save some time at the end for any questions, so if you guys can wait until then, if you do have any burning questions that you want to ask us, we will definitely have time for that at the end of our presentation. So let's go ahead and get on to our first tactic.
All right, so tactic number 1, user stories. So for those of you who have done agile development, you're probably fairly familiar with the idea of user stories. But regardless of the development methodology that you use, I really encourage you that you should always use user stories in your development. And what is a user story? A user story looks something like this. As a user type, I want feature for some reason. And it's really important that you have all 3 aspects of these when you're thinking about the functionality of your application. The as a user type helps you define who is going to use this application, and what is this person like. Understanding who your users are and what they are trying to accomplish will really help you make better design decisions, both for the front end and even the back end sometimes. I want feature. So this is the obvious one. This is the one that we all like talking about, right? The feature is the thing that's the easy part of this. So have your feature, and then for some reason. And reason is so important because it tells you the why. Why does this user want this feature? And the why can really influence what you're going to do for your implementation. Why might bring you one direction that's completely different than what you initially thought this feature should be. Because when you understand who the user is and why they're doing what they're doing, it totally changes the discussion that you're going to have. So how do you get to user stories? You start by understanding your personas. And I'll show you an example persona, but in general, personas are just exemplar users. The persona allows you and your team to talk about the user in a shared way. And this way, everybody has the same understanding of who the user is that you're actually designing for. You don't necessarily need to capture every single user that's going to use your application. Think about what you're doing for your release and who the primary, maybe 3 users are that you're going to be focusing on for that release. Once you have your personas, you then can define epics or high-level feature areas that that user wants from your application. And then once you have your epics, you can decompose those into individual user stories, and those are the actionable areas that you actually start developing against.
So welcome to Fuddy. Fuddy is going to be our kind of imaginary example application that you guys are going to kind of see as we talk about these tactics, kind of give you an idea of how you could use this with an application. So we're all at a conference here, right? Everyone wants to go out at night, have some food, you're in a new city. So Fuddy is our imaginary app here that you can use to set up things called receptions. So you can either have people join a reception that you're setting up, so you can kind of have people come join you at dinner, and then also, you could also join receptions. So the kind of this idea of creating and joining receptions. So you guys are going to see this as kind of a theme throughout some of the tactics that we're going to talk about with you today.
So we had a little fun with Fuddy, and we started thinking about who is our primary user for this application. And we decided our primary persona is Cheryl. Cheryl is a conference attendee who really enjoys networking as part of her conference experience. And she really wants to experience the city she's in as well. So she wants to get some local cuisine, meet some new people, have interesting conversations, learn more than she might during the conference events themselves. So then if we take Cheryl and think about what her main goal is, what her epic would be, it might look something like this. Cheryl wants to locate and meet new people over dinner. She doesn't want to eat alone. She wants to find good food and eat with others. You can then decompose this into your 2 user stories. And here I think we have 2 main user stories that Cheryl might be interested in. One is creating her own reception. Maybe she's here in San Francisco. She's been in San Francisco before. She knows a great restaurant. She wants to go sign up for that restaurant, invite other people to join her there. Or another story might be she's in a city where she's not as familiar. She wants to join receptions that already exist. So she's going to browse existing receptions and go join them. So understanding Cheryl and what she's trying to accomplish can help us better understand what our design needs to accomplish. Oops, sorry. So Tiffany, we have user stories. It's time to code, right?
Yep, let's get to it. All right, no, not quite yet. We have a few more tactics to get through before we start any coding at all. Now that you have your user story, it's really time to start doing some brainstorming. So, get together with some coworkers, some other people that might be working on this project with you. Get together in a room, have a whiteboard, and you kind of start talking about what are the possibilities at this stage, which is going to bring us to our next tactic. And that is sketching. Sketching is a way to kind of explore multiple design options. Go ahead. And lets you kind of explore multiple design options. It's very quick, it's easy, and you do this without any coding. You can really do this in minutes or even seconds. So it's just a matter of doing some quick sketches. You guys, I'm sure, have seen people draw on the back of a napkin, and 10 years later, it turns into this huge application. So it's kind of at this stage when you're doing the sketching. One of the things with sketching is that you really do want to iterate. So your first idea is rarely your best idea, and this is especially true when you are designing an application. Think of this not like a multiple choice test. With multiple choice tests, you guys are always taught, go with your first instinct, go with your gut. And so this is not like that. With sketching, you really do want to get together and iterate and figure out, what are the different possibilities you can, draw and redraw and really come up to whatever that best possible solution is. You guys may have seen something like this before. This is divergent and convergent thinking. This is something that's really cool that happens when you're doing brainstorming, and it kind of happens as well when you're doing some sketching. So during the beginning part of this meeting that you might be having, where you have everyone together, you're talking about, what are all the possibilities? So, just getting all of those ideas out. It doesn't matter if they're good ideas, bad ideas. You're just getting them all laid out so you can kind of see what are the possible solutions for this application. Then during the latter half, you're going to start making choices. You eliminate those bad ideas and you kind of come back together in agreement of what the solution could possibly be.
So Tiffany, I'm really not good at drawing. Do I have to sketch?
No, I'm not good at drawing either, believe me, but you don't have to be an artist to be able to do an effective sketch. And I know a lot of people have problems sometimes getting up and drawing in front of other people. They're afraid that you're going to be judged. Your coworkers might laugh at you, make fun of you. They might, but who cares? Because what I've found is that the more you do this, and once you're up there and you do start drawing and doing some sketching, that you're going to find that other people are actually going to get up and join you. They're going to be like, you know what? No, we don't want that over there. And you're like, where? And then they get up and they help you. They're erasing things and drawing as well. And it really does become a collaborative effort at that point. So I encourage you, don't be afraid to get up and do some sketching sometime.
So in this example, we took our app, Fuddy, and we sat down at the whiteboard with a couple colleagues and just tried to think about what could this app be, how might we display some of the restaurants when we're looking at those with Cheryl. So here we came up with 2 different variations, and really the value was not necessarily the sketches at the end of the day. Yeah, we came away with these 2 sketches, but the value of it was the discussion. We had really rich discussions about what the restaurant listings should be, what we're actually going to do with those, how we might display them differently, how we could differentiate our app from other apps. So the sketching didn't really matter at the end of the day. It was the rich discussion that we had as a team about what this app could be.
During sketching, you'll also find that sometimes it naturally starts to happen that you kind of start to figure out, how are things going to work together? What is the user going to go through? So this brings us to our next tactic, which is called user flows. User flows really do provide you with a map. Like sketching, it really helps you flesh out requirements. It gives you ideas of the design and the possibilities and the whole experience that the user might be going through. It's really important at this stage that you're talking about the user, though. This is from the user's perspective. So you want to think about it from what they're going to be doing and not necessarily what the application may do. And that's for developers, sometimes that's really hard to get into that mindset. One of the cool things about user flows is that it really does help you get early stakeholder buy-in. I've actually used this quite often on the developer's website, and it does really show you a map of this experience, and it lets you kind of get all on the same page and to make sure that you're talking the same language, that you're talking about things working the same way. It really does help you get approvals and kind of this early stakeholder buy-in at this stage. So task flows or user flows are super useful in that capacity.
One of the things that we heard at the beginning of DevNation was about project failure rates. And if you look at the reasons why projects fail, stakeholder buy-in is one of the top reasons that things end up failing at the end of it. And so this can really help you get that stakeholder buy-in and make sure everybody's on the same page before you go build it and waste your time.
Exactly. It's a great communication tool. Just like sketching, the best time to do this is really before you do any coding. So you're not doing any coding at this point. You're just getting those ideas out there on how things could work. It's great to use once you have your user stories or your primary user flows defined. So that's a great time to start doing the user flows at that stage. It really does help you flesh out the requirements further, and it could also, like I mentioned before, happen naturally when you're doing some of these early design brainstorming sessions. When you're doing a user flow, you really want to think about how you're going to solve the problem without technology. So what is that blue sky approach? In an ideal world, how many screens would they be going through? What does that experience look like, for the user? And you really want to keep it simple at first and then start making it a little bit more complicated as you add in your technology and different ways that your systems work together.
So for our Fuddy app, here's an example user flow that we put together. So going back to those 2 user stories that we had, Cheryl might create her own reception, or she might join an existing reception. So you can see at the beginning, at her home page, she's going to kind of make a choice and go down one of these 2 paths. From there, we show how many screens she's going to go through and some of the other interactions that we're going to start thinking about. So we might not have, without doing this, we might not have gotten to the point where we thought, oh, we need a confirmation page, and hey, maybe we actually need confirmation emails as well, and start thinking about how that works with the system early on so that you're not trying to rush or you miss that feature or functionality at the end of the day.
So that's just a very simple example of a user flow. We do have some other little more complicated examples as well. So here's some other additional, if you have someone that's good with graphics, you can definitely make these more engaging, a little bit more complicated. So this is one example here. Here's another example where if you look off to the side closest to me, that you kind of have 2 little users here, so kind of keeping that user persona in mind as well as you're creating this user flow. And then we have one final example here. This would be something very basic, how a application might work. And you can see there's some decision points and some interactions with some systems happening here as well.
And just to go back to one, this obviously was done by a great designer, and she's put us all to shame here. So we don't necessarily expect that you're going to make beautiful user flows. And that's why we said, even boxes and arrows really just gets you thinking about how the user is going to work through these screens and interactions.
So one last thing to keep in mind when you're doing these user flows is that you really do want to optimize the task. You want to keep in mind whatever that, what was that simple state, what was that blue sky approach, and how can you get back to it? Because you'll find as you really do start adding in your technology and how your different systems work that it's going to get more and more complicated. So I really encourage you to look again as you get kind of towards the end of doing these user flows, take a look again at what was that ideal approach. Is there things that you can eliminate, different ways that you could do things to get back to that ideal user experience, so those ideal flows. Here's an example from, this is actually from the Red Hat developers website. So this is a real world example. Early on, we had 8 screens and 6 clicks to download our software, get registered, accept our terms and conditions. So, not awful, but it could definitely be better. So as we looked at different ways to streamline this and to get rid of different things, we found that we could, maybe we don't have to have them verify their email first. So let's eliminate that step. Let's reduce that. And then you'll see by the time we get to that bottom line there, the lovely greenish color, that we ended up with 4 screens and 3 clicks. So we also reduced the having to have an additional terms and conditions, like a separate screen for that, and we combined that into the registration form and had all that be one step. So you'll see we ended up reducing by half just by going through this process. We went from 8 screens and 6 clicks down to 4 screens and 3 clicks. So which one is the better user experience? Obviously the last one. It's much faster, it's much more streamlined, it's less painful for your users.
What I love about this flow is that top line is, like I said, this real world example. This is so common. It happens so often that we create these systems and we add on to them and we combine different systems together. And without even knowing it, all of a sudden we've created this really complex user experience for our users. And when you take a moment to actually map it out and start thinking about it, you realize how bad you've created, how bad of an experience you've created for your users. And just kind of talking about this together and seeing how you can move towards something better is really powerful to do with your teams.
Yeah, definitely. This is one of those where we showed kind of this first line to some of our stakeholders, and they were like, what? This is what our users are going through? So, they really encouraged us to figure out different ways to solve this and to make it much more streamlined.
So now that we have our persona, our user stories, our user flows, and some sketches, we're well on our way to starting to build our application. So what other things should you keep in mind as you're developing and building and designing your app? That moves us into tactic number 4. Move away from the data table.
What do you mean move away from the data table?
Well, unfortunately, data tables create a lot of information overload. What happens is that when you put information in a data table, it's all equal, and you're leaving it up to the user to really find what is most important to them. And it happens pretty innocently, I think, as developers especially. As a developer, you have a database, you have a bunch of information, somebody's telling you to put it on the screen. You go, okay, great, no problem. Here it is. Done. And you think, it's only 4 columns, it's pretty easy to look at, this is great, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah, looks good to me. I like it.
Unfortunately, this is what begins to happen. Over time, all of a sudden you add columns, you add a lot of complexity. All of a sudden you have all this table junk. You have pagination, you have filters and sorting and adding columns, removing columns, trying to figure out how to just manage your table, not manage your data. And this is the problem, is you're not focusing on the data and you're not thinking about your user. You're not thinking about what is the information that they really need, what's more important to them than other pieces of data. So if you look at our sketches that we started with, what was actually really funny is when we were with our colleagues who are designers, it was almost impossible for me to get somebody to draw a table. Right. I had to erase their drawing 4 times and be like, no,
draw
really,
a table. And she's like,
just a table.
Yes. Just a table? Yes.
Yes, just a table. So we started with just a table, sort of. And that was good for just thinking about what types of information we're going to put on here, but we very quickly moved into how can we show this information more richly? How can we engage our users in a better way? And with the example on the right, you can start to do much richer communication with your users because you can highlight certain pieces of information, you can make other pieces of information sort of hidden or less prominent, and it makes it so that you're driving their eye through the information in a way that makes sense. And there's a lot of really great examples out there of this. If you just go and use different applications, look around the internet, you can find great examples. So here's some different examples of how to display restaurants. And you can see each application has made some decisions about what they think is most important for their users. And they've changed the size and the layout and the relationship of information based on what they're trying to drive their users to.
All right, Catherine, so I love data tables. So is there ever any time that I can actually use a data table? Is there a good time to use one?
I get asked this often when I talk about this because I think I break a lot of developer hearts when I say don't use a table. There are some cases when tables make sense. Most of the times when table would make sense is when you're doing you're doing numerical comparisons. So here you can see you can really easily compare across rows or down the columns, and the human eye is very good at making comparisons of that type, and so that is a valid use of a data table. However, I would really encourage you to think about, is this the best way to engage with your customer? Is this the best way for them to work with your data? Sometimes it might be, but in this case, you could use the same data and put it in something like this. This is an interactive graph where your user can kind of roll their mouse around, see different parts of the data highlighted, filter it and sort it in interesting ways. And that way they're engaging with your data. They're not just glancing at your data.
So like Catherine mentioned with the data tables, users do really need to be able to scan quickly and find information quickly. This really helps them kind of eliminate this information overloads. So this is going to bring us to our next tactic as we move from data tables to these lists and other different ways of displaying information. So our next tactic is Whitespace. Whitespace is really the amount of space between the elements on your screen or on your page. It's often overlooked because as developers, we find that you're looking more at what information, are we even getting the information? So, we're trying to put all of it on the screen. You're kind of focusing more on maybe colors, the location of the information. So Whitespace is often overlooked as developers. Whitespace gives you some breathing room and some balance. You don't really have to cram everything into one page or cram it all into one screen anymore. We're finding as there's this increase in usage of mobile devices, tablets, everything in between, there's this kind of shift in user expectations now that we're seeing happen where they don't really expect everything to be on one screen anymore. It's okay to scroll. It's okay to go to different screens. Whitespace improves the readability of your applications as well, and it shows content prioritization. And what I mean by content prioritization is by giving elements more space around them, you're making it seem like they're more important, and it's letting the user kind of focus on them more, and that can actually, in the long run, improve retention as well. So here is an example of a screen here. This is actually one of our downloads pages from the developer's website. So you can see you've got, hey, here's all our downloads. Here's some titles, some descriptive information. This isn't bad. I can read this. It's okay, right? Well, what if we added some white space to this? So you can see, looking at this, you're like, there's some breathing room here. You can see that we've increased the amount of space between the columns. We've increased the line height. So when you're kind of looking at that old version versus this new version, it's much easier to scan. It's less strain on your eye as well.
So what if I have a lot of white space? I mean, it looks kind of empty if I have all this white space on my page, right?
Well, it could, but you know what? White space doesn't actually have to be white. So this is kind of a common misconception. Everyone's like, hey, let's just add some white space. And you're like, okay, so you add space that's white around your elements. And it doesn't have to be white. It really goes back to that idea that you need to have this space and this distance between the elements. If we look at the current Patternfly website, you can kind of see this as a different example. Even though there's a background pattern here, even though there's kind of a dark background color, because of the use of white space, your focus and where your eye goes to is really the center of the screen where that logo is, as well as the name of the site and the description. So I encourage you, to look at different ways to add white space, and again, it doesn't actually have to be white.
This looks great, Tiffany, and I really love that it isn't all white. It gives you some character without really cramming everything on a page. And while we're here, I will just take a moment to say we really hope that you check out Patternfly. Patternfly does take these tactics into consideration that we're talking about today. Patternfly is our framework for and patterns for great design that you can use for enterprise applications. And we have code and designs that you can borrow and use and contribute to if you want to as well.
Yep.
All right, tactic number 6 is guerrilla testing.
All right, this sounds a little dangerous. Guerrilla testing? I don't know, you guys, I'm a little scared about this one.
Yeah, I'm not really sure where the term came from, so I'm not going to stand behind the term. But really what guerrilla testing is ad hoc usability testing. If any of you have talked to anybody about proper usability testing, you might have heard of that as where we set up a user and then there's double-sided glass. You have somebody who's observing in another room and it's all very proper, very structured. And guerrilla testing kind of moves away from that and gets into something where anybody can do it. you can gain value and feedback on your designs in a very basic way without investing a lot of time, resources, and effort. And as developers, what I would assert to you is that if you spend 10 minutes, that's it, 10 minutes testing your application, I think you'll save over 10 days of recoding. The value that you're going to get from this is going to be unbelievable. And it's scary going into it. And I understand it's a little scary going into it. But the first one you do, you're going to see so much value from. You're going to be like, all right, this is great. Let's keep doing it. So what does Guerrilla usability testing look like? This is an example of our usability team at Red Hat doing some Guerrilla usability testing. And you can see they're actually just down in the Red Hat cafeteria. It's a very laid-back atmosphere. And all you have to do is just bring your app. It can be literally the sketches that you've made on paper. It doesn't even have to be a functional app. It can be your application or website as you've built it that you bring down as well on a laptop. Either way works. And you put it in front of some people who have not been involved in the process of designing it. And why I say just people, humans, is because these don't actually need to be the users that you will actually have using your application. They don't have to be your personas. And the point of this is not to necessarily understand whether somebody can fully grasp your application and use it in an everyday environment. The point of it is to understand if during your design process you've created any situations that users are going to stumble over. It's catching those basic things in page design that you don't see because you're too involved in the process. So I encourage you, if you're going to do Guerrilla testing, be casual about it. It doesn't need to be very structured. What you want to do is choose a task or two that you want to test. So for our funny example, a task might be, can you create an open reception for others to join you in? And you would give that task to the people who walk up, and you would maybe give them a little bit of overview information about your application, just enough so that they understand what the main goals of it are, generally what they're working with. But you don't want to give them too much. Then you present them with this task, and you shut up. And that's the best thing you can do, is shut up. Because if you start talking, you're going to be putting your biases on that user. You're going to tell them how it's working. And so it's really important to remember that this is not a demo of your application to users. This is asking them to complete a task with your application and stepping back and letting them do it and observing how they do that. And as you observe, you're going to see them do things that you never thought they were going to do. And that's the value of this test, because you're going to see them stumble over all sorts of things. And even us as professional designers, we see users do all sorts of things we would never expect.
Definitely.
One thing I do encourage is, you don't really realize it going into this, but you talk to one user and you're like, wow, that was great information. You talk to a second user, you talk to a third user, you completely forgot what that first user even said to you. So if at all possible, record. There's different ways of doing this. You could do a voice recorder, you could record the screen. If you don't have those resources, just have a buddy come down and take notes for you. Just have somebody else that can help you record what's happening. And lastly, like I said in the beginning, once you try this once, you're going to realize how powerful it is and how useful it is for your application. And you're going to get maybe a little carried away. So remember to respect your user's time. Just ask them to complete one or two tasks and then move on to a different user.
All right, so we've talked about testing now. There's a variety of testing. Catherine just talked about Guerrilla testing, and I think we kind of all understand, that there's definitely value to testing in all of its different capacities. It's a great way to make sure that your app is working as expected. So while testing may be occasional, there's something else that you can do that's kind of an ongoing thing to really get some feedback from your users. So this brings us to our last tactic, which is getting user feedback. All right, the application is launched. It's live. Yay! All right, we're good to go, right? You're done. Your job's done. You got it running. It's live. It's out there. Well, not quite. So at this point, really, your job is probably about half over. I really encourage you, to figure out different ways to get user feedback. Your job is not done at this point. It's kind of just beginning, and you really want to see, are they using the app the way that you expect? Are they getting from it the things that you were hoping that they were going to get from it? So I really encourage you to provide some tools for them to give you that feedback, whether it's email or creating some type of Google form, some type of survey app, some survey app that you can use. There's all kinds of things out of the box that you could set up with. And to give them ways to get this feedback to you for bugs and issue, as well as maybe some possible enhancement requests as well. When you set up this feedback mechanism, it's really important to think ahead of time about the details that you're going to need. So having them just, giving them just your email address may not be enough. So think about these details, like what would you need to be able to solve an issue if someone came to you with an issue? So this may be asking them for what type of system they're on. Possibly, are they on a mobile device or some other type of device? So really think about that up front, because it's going to reduce the amount of back and forth that you have going on with the user. So it's also going to help you get to a solution that much faster. This is one of those that I know some people have a little bit of trouble with. But see if there's a way that you can expose this feedback that you're getting to a much wider audience, whether it's publicly or a little bit wider audience within your company or within your team. There's a really great value from this because, for one, you're going to hopefully, you're less likely to get duplicate feedback. So if they see that someone's already submitted it, they may not be submitting the same thing. So that's going to save you time. It also shows that you have confidence in your application, and it shows that you care about your users and you care about the type of feedback that they may be giving you. So this is a really powerful and strong tool to kind of show and give that kind of emotional relation with your users. Here is one example of a feedback mechanism. So this is for the OpenShift site, and this one you can see that this is more of a suggestion form. So it's very clear, I suggest you enter your idea here. So this is definitely one type of getting user feedback, and you can see there's also the option here to vote things up and down, which I think users really like, because it does make them feel like they're part of the application, that they're contributing to it. And it's really important, especially like at Red Hat as an open source company, to kind of have that ability. Here is another example. This is a very simple form. So it doesn't have to be this crazy advanced form with 20 fields on it. It can be very simple. Just have them enter a description. What went wrong? And then you can also attach a file. This is really important, especially for web applications and some other applications as well, to be able to attach an image and give them that option to include a screen capture, because a picture really is worth 1,000 words. And again, that's going to help you reduce that amount of feedback or the amount of back and forth that you have going on with your users. And here's just kind of a example here. This is the activity stream. So this is exposed. Anyone can come on here, anyone can see what's happening. And again, I really encourage you guys to look at different ways and possibilities to be able to do this, because again, this is going to help reduce duplicates, and it does kind of show you that you care about getting feedback from your users. One final example here. This is for the Patternfly application, the Patternfly website, and kind of all the Patternfly UI elements that we have on the site there. But this one is a combination here. So you can see that things can be flagged as enhancements, but there's also bugs and issues, and this is all in one same place. This is a different option. So look at your application, look at the people that are supporting your application, and kind of figure out what works best for you, because it may be just getting feedback, or it may be just providing an email for these bugs and issues, or maybe something a little more a little more advanced where you're kind of getting everything all together in one place?
I would say one thing for those of you building applications that aren't necessarily web-based, think about how you can instrument those applications to give you feedback as well. If you do instrumentation into your application early on, it means that you can really understand what pieces of the application your users are really using, what they aren't using, maybe what they're being challenged by, just through data that you get from your application if possible.
One final thing I would like to say about user feedback is don't be afraid to follow up with the user either. This is not shark-infested waters. I got my little shark up there, but they're taking the time to submit this feedback, so it means that they do care about getting a resolution to this. They want a solution. They want you to help them. So it's not scary to talk to them, and I really encourage you, if you do have additional follow-up questions, email them back, give them a call, talk to them and figure out what's really going on, that they were contacting you in the first place.
Yeah, I know I've submitted a few bugs or various feedback to different apps and websites that I've used, and I actually appreciate it when somebody reaches back out to me because I know that they're actually listening. So it's actually can be a really good thing to build that relationship with your users.
Definitely.
Okay, so today we have gone through 7 user experience tactics with you. The first one was user stories, and this, remember, it was about why, what they want, and why they want it. Did I say why twice? Who, what they want, and why they want it. Who, what, why. There you go.
Next, we talked about sketching and user flows. So these are both things that are really great to use early in the design process. So these kind of are during those brainstorming sessions to kind of figure out what are the possibilities, what are the options, and then going back to that, divergent and convergent thinking. So you kind of first start wide, like all the possible solutions, and then you kind of bring everything back in. So sketching and user flows are really useful for that piece.
Then we talked about how to move away from the data table and how data tables create information overload pretty often for users. And if you think about other ways of displaying information, it can provide a much richer experience for your users and help guide them to the information that is most important.
Next thing we talked about was Whitespace. Remember, Whitespace doesn't have to be white. It gives your elements breathing room. It helps you with content prioritization. It really helps kind of reduce some eye strain for your users as they're trying to find certain things on your screens.
We then talked about guerrilla testing, which doesn't mean that a gorilla is going to come attack you, but you can get some great feedback from people that just haven't been involved in the application design and development process and aren't familiar with your application. And just by putting your application in front of a user for 10 minutes, you can save yourself a lot of time down the line.
And then finally, we talked about user feedback. Making sure that you give these have these mechanisms in place for them to provide suggestions, report bugs and issues. And the importance there, again, was that it shows that you care about getting their feedback, that you want the application to get better, and users really do appreciate that. So remember back to the beginning, almost an hour ago, as a takeaway, some additional time with our tactics really will help you make the most of these 10 seconds or this 20 minutes that you have to achieve a goal.
And we hope that we've kind of really excited you about the possibilities of bringing user experience into your process. So I've included some additional UX resources here that you can use. There's a lot of really good information out there about user experience and different things that you can do throughout your development process. And we really encourage you to go check some of these out and see how they work for you.
And our presentation will be available on the website, because I'm sure not everyone's going to be able to write all this down right now.
Yes. And I'll be tweeting it after the fact, so if you want to follow either of us, you can find it on Twitter as well. So please connect with us, and does anybody have any questions? In the back.
Not necessarily a question. I want to say about including the data table. One of the side advantages of that is going to the more hierarchical approach allows you to be much more to replace
Very true, very true.
That's a great point. Thank you. Yes.
Love the comment. One of the challenges we're having is users that open up a ticket in our system and provide a document stack of detailed things they want. It's like, we've been trying to talk them to simple stories. Do you have any recommendations on doing that?
So are they attaching literal, like,
Spreadsheets, Word documents,
Okay.
5 pages long.
wow.
That's great, though, that you're getting that level of detail from them. But I'm sure it's very hard to sort through all
Like,
of it.
not that great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the ways that you might be able to tackle that is the format in which you allow people to give you feedback. If you create something that's, some of those examples we showed are kind of forum-like, where it becomes almost a discussion, it might make it so that it's, I don't want to say they'll be shamed, but I think, people will not be impressed if they're just throwing documents up there. And that creates more of a conversation between you and your users, and they can kind of ask for things in a different way. And it also gives you that ability to do votes or prioritization as well.
Yep. All right. Any other burning questions? I know it's the end of the day. I'm sure everyone is tired. It has been a long day today. Well, thank you
Okay.
so much for joining us.